Picture this, a polished conference room in the heart of Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm sitting across from a guy in a custom suit who's about to change my life. My name's Darren McCabe, and for 9 years I poured my heart into Travant Corp, a financial services firm I helped grow from a scrappy underdog to a $30 million powerhouse. I'm 46, a senior account executive, and my client portfolio, it brought in nearly 40% of the company's revenue. No magic tricks, just relentless work, long days, endless flights and relationships built on trust. So when Brian Ellsworth, our new VP of Sales, slid termination papers across the table and said we need hungrier talent, I didn't flinch. I smiled, thanked him and walked out. But let me tell you what happened next was a masterclass in corporate miscalculation, and I'm here to unpack it all. Every twist, every betrayal, and the moment I turned their mistake into my greatest victory. Stick with me because this isn't just my story. It's a wake-up call for anyone who's ever been undervalued. Let's rewind. I joined Travant back when it was called Midwestern Financial Services, a small operation with big dreams. Everett Stanton, the CEO, hired me straight from a competitor. Darren, he said, I need someone who knows this market inside out, someone clients trust. For 7 years, I delivered. I took our client base from local businesses to national giants, extended contracts from 1-year deals to 5-year commitments, and brought in heavyweights like Lockhart Manufacturing and the Henderson Group. My wife Rebecca used to tease me about being married to my clients. Thursday dinners with the Johnsons, weekend calls with Travis Friss. It was all part of the job. My kids Emily and Jack grew up hearing dads working so often, it became their normal. I missed ball games, recitals, even Emily's high school graduation because of a client emergency. I told myself it was worth it, that I was building something lasting. And for a while it felt true. Then Brian Ellsworth showed up. 6 months before that fateful meeting, he strutted into Travant as the new VP of Sales, handpicked by Everett to shake things up. Brian was all flash custom suits, motivational buzzwords, and zero time in the trenches. He'd never joined me on a client call, never seen the late-night emails, or the trust it took to close a multi-million-dollar deal. Within weeks, he slashed my commission by 20%, even though my numbers were rock solid. My desk got shoved into a corner during an office renovation. My name vanished from meeting invites. One day, I caught an IT guy tinkering with my computer while I was at lunch. Small things, but they added up. I'm not one for paranoia, but after 2 decades in this game, you learn to read the room. Something was brewing. Here's where I'll pause to reflect. Looking back, those red flags weren't just corporate politics, they were a deliberate plan. I didn't know it then, but Travant was gearing up for a sale to Veritas Capital, a big player in the financial sector. My relationships with clients were the company's biggest asset, but also their biggest liability. Why? Because those clients trusted me, not Travant's logo or downtown office. To make the company attractive to buyers, they needed to untether those accounts from me, make them corporate property. Brian wasn't just a bad boss, he was a hired gun to execute that plan. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to that day in the conference room. When Brian fired me, I didn't argue. I packed 9 years into a cardboard box, a coffee mug, my daughter-painted family photos, and a folder of client contacts I'd kept separate from the company database. Call it instinct. As I walked out, Valerie from accounting spotted me. You changing offices? She asked, puzzled. Something like that, I said, keeping it light. In the elevator, I stood next to Everett, who was glued to his phone. He nodded without looking up, oblivious to the bomb Brian had just dropped. I drove home in silence, no radio, just my thoughts. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the driveway. Travis, Chris, my biggest client, texting about dinner plans for our contract renewal. He didn't know I'd been fired. Nobody did. I set the phone down and stared out the kitchen window. Brian hadn't just fired an employee, he'd cut the lifeline to millions in revenue, and he had no clue what was coming. That night, I poured myself a bourbon and sat alone. Rebecca was in Denver helping her sister with a new baby, so the house was quiet, perfect for thinking. I pulled up my employment contract on my laptop. The non-compete clause was weak. It only applied if I quit, not if I was terminated. Legally, I was free to take my clients elsewhere. My personal phone held the real gold, 9 years of relationships, over 200 contacts, from CEOs to vendors, all built on trust. These weren't Travant's assets. They were mine, earned through countless dinners, golf outings, and late-night calls. As I sipped my drink, a calm settled over me. Not panic, not anger, just clarity. Brian had made a catastrophic mistake, and I didn't need to lift a finger to prove it. The market would do that for me. The next morning, I made 3 calls. No drama, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Travant as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it from me. His response was instant. What happened? Who's handling our account? Now I stayed neutral. Brian Ellsworth or maybe Alicia Winters, the new hire. That's all I can tell you. Your call from here. I made similar calls to James Henderson and Peter Carlton, 2 other big clients. No pitching, no recruiting, just information. By noon, my phone was blowing up. Word spreads fast in our industry. Clients were reaching out confused, asking what was going on. At 2 p.m., Everett called, sounding rattled. Darren, we need to talk about your transition. Clients are concerned. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't here to fix their mess. Here's where I'll add some perspective. In corporate America, loyalty is a one-way street. I gave Travant 9 years, 60-hour weeks, missed family moments, all to build something I thought was ours. But to them, I was a cog replaceable the moment a bigger deal came along. That's the game, and I don't begrudge it. What I do resent is the betrayal. They didn't just fire me. They tried to erase me, thinking my clients would stick around for their shiny office and discount offers. Big mistake. Relationships aren't assets you can transfer like a spreadsheet. They're built on trust, and trust follows people, not brands. Let me share a real story to bring this home. A few years back, I was at a client dinner with Travis Friss in St. Louis. His company, Lockhart Manufacturing, was on the fence about signing with Travant. Over steaks at a downtown grill, Travis told me about his daughter's college graduation, how proud he was, but how he'd missed it for a board meeting. I shared that I'd missed Emily's graduation for a client call. We bonded over that, not as salesman and client, but as dads who'd made tough choices. That night, he signed the contract, not because of Travant's pitch, but because he trusted me to have his back. That's the kind of bond Brian underestimated. Back to the story. By 4 p.m. that day, Travant's legal team emailed me a stern reminder about confidentiality obligations. At 5 p.m., Brian texted offering a consulting gig to discuss my exit package. Too late. Travis called me at 5:30. Just got off with your CEO and that VP. They promised continuity, said Alicia would handle everything, even offered a 10% discount. I asked what he told them. That I'd think about it, he said. Then, unprompted, he added, I've sent notice to terminate our contract, citing change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton did the same. I stayed silent, letting it sink in. Darren, where are you landing? Because that's where our business is going. By the next morning, 8 clients had pulled their contracts, totaling $3.2 million in revenue. Everett called an emergency board meeting complete chaos, according to Julia, my former assistant. Brian tried to pin it on me, claiming I was tampering with clients. Everett was furious, asking why no one saw this coming. I could have told them, because you stopped valuing what mattered. Meanwhile, I got a call from Michael Grantley, head of Grantley & Company, a smaller but respected competitor. Darren, I hear you're available. Our mutual friends speak highly of you. He offered me a senior VP role, a 6-figure signing bonus, full autonomy, and a seat on the executive committee. When can you start? He asked. How's tomorrow? I replied. It wasn't about money. It was about respect, something Travant had forgotten. Let's talk about what this moment meant. Getting fired is a gut punch, no question, but it's also a mirror forcing you to see what you're really worth. For years, I tied my value to Travant's success, thinking I was building a legacy. But that call from Michael showed me something else. My value wasn't in their logo or their corner office. It was in the trust I'd earned, the relationships I'd nurtured. That's not something a company can fire or replace. It's yours always. A week into my new role at Grantley, Julia called with a bombshell. It wasn't just Brian wanting his own people, she said. They were planning to sell Travant to Veritas Capital. The pieces clicked. Veritas wanted to integrate Travant's clients into their portfolio, but my relationships were too personal, too tied to me. Brian's job was to phase me out, make those accounts company assets. My firing wasn't about performance. It was a calculated move to prep for the sale. But it backfired. Veritas pulled their offer when my clients started leaving. Travant's stock tanked 12% in 5 days. Everett texted begging for a meeting. I didn't respond. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. 9 years of loyalty reduced to a chess move. Let me share another story. Back in 2018, I worked with Peter Carlton of Carlton Industries. His company was struggling after a bad merger and competitors were circling. I spent months tailoring a financial package to keep them afloat, even flying to Chicago on my own dime to meet their board. When we closed the deal, Peter pulled me aside. "Darren, you didn't just save our business, you saved 200 jobs. That moment stuck with me. It's why I do this, not for the commission, but for the impact. Travant forgot that. They thought a 10% discount and a new hire could replace what I brought to the table. Wrong. 3 weeks after joining Grantley, I was invited to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference. The topic, building client loyalty. The irony was thick. I knew Everett and Travant's board would be there, so I prepared not with vengeance, but with facts. I worked with Grantley's analysts to compile data. Clients who followed me saw 53% faster service response times, 30% lower implementation costs, and 22% higher satisfaction scores. On stage, I didn't name Travant. I didn't need to. I talked about trust, about how companies mistake relationships for assets. When you treat people as interchangeable, I said, clients show you how wrong you are. The room was silent. Everett's face was stone. After the panel, 5 more clients signed with Grantley, adding $2.7 million in revenue. Here's my take. This wasn't about me winning. It was about the market proving a universal truth. In any industry, finance, tech, retail, relationships are the currency that matters. You can have the best product, the flashiest office, but if you don't invest in the people who build trust, you're building on sand. Travant learned that the hard way. Their acquisition collapsed, Brian was pursuing other opportunities, and Everett stepped down. Their building's sign came down, replaced by a 4-lease notice. Meanwhile, Grantley grew 34% in my first year, with my portfolio hitting $20 million. Let's wrap with a final story. Last Christmas, Rebecca gave me a framed quote, "The best revenge is massive success." For a while, I kept it on my desk, a reminder of what I'd overcome. But one day I turned it face down. Revenge wasn't the point. The real victory was building something better, a career where I'm valued, a life where I don't miss my son's band gigs or my daughter's calls. I even met Everett for lunch, not to gloat, but to close the chapter. He apologized, admitted he'd prioritized the deal over people. I nodded, wished him well, and walked away lighter. As I drove home that night, the Kansas City skyline fading in my rearview mirror, I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. My new life at Grantley & Company was just beginning, but the echoes of Travant's collapse were still rippling through the industry. I thought the worst was behind me. Boy, was I wrong. The next few months would unravel a web of deception so deep it would make Brian's betrayal look like a warm-up act. Let me take you through it, because what happened next wasn't just a corporate fallout. It was a high-stakes game of loyalty, revenge, and redemption that nearly cost me everything. A few weeks after the Midwest Financial Services Conference, I was settling into my new corner office at Grantley. The view was better, the coffee was stronger, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that belonged to me. My team was growing, 2 new analysts and a marketing specialist, all hand-picked for their hustle and heart. We were closing deals left and right, with 11 former Travant clients now firmly in our portfolio, bringing in nearly $5 million in annual revenue. But then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. You're not done with Travant yet." No signature, no context. My gut tightened. I'd seen enough corporate games to know this wasn't a prank. I opened my laptop, and there it was, an anonymous email with a single attachment, a PDF labeled Travant Internal Memo, Project Clean Slate. The document was a bombshell. It detailed a secret plan approved by Everett and Brian 6 months before my firing to systematically phase out high-risk relationship managers, read me to make Travant more attractive for acquisition. But here's the kicker, they hadn't just planned to fire me. They'd hired a private consulting firm, Apex Strategies, to dig into my personal life bank accounts, travel records, even my kids' school schedules to find leverage in case I fought back. They called it risk mitigation. I called it a violation. My hands shook as I read the final line, McCabe's client relationships are a liability. Neutralize before Veritas, deal closes. Let me pause here to process this. For 9 years, I'd given Travant everything, my time, my family's patience, my sanity. And they repaid me by treating me like a threat, spying on my life to protect their bottom line. It wasn't just business, it was personal, invasive, and frankly unhinged. But the memo hinted at something bigger. Apex Strategies wasn't just working for Travant, they were tied to Veritas Capital, the same firm that pulled out of the acquisition. This wasn't a simple corporate cleanup, it was a coordinated effort to control the entire Midwest financial services market. And I was the loose end they hadn't counted on. I forwarded the memo to Lawrence Finch, my attorney, with a single note. We need to talk. Now. Lawrence called me within the hour. Darren, this is dynamite, he said. If this is real, Travant's board could face lawsuits, maybe even criminal charges for privacy violations. But we need proof it's authentic. I agreed to meet him the next day, but as I hung up, another email arrived from the same anonymous sender. Meet me at the Rusty Anchor, 9 p.m. Come alone. The Rusty Anchor was a dive bar on the edge of Kansas City, the kind of place where deals were whispered over cheap whiskey. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. I had to know who was pulling the strings. That night, I walked into the Rusty Anchor, the air thick with cigarette smoke, and the hum of a jukebox playing Springsteen. At a corner booth sat a woman I vaguely recognized, mid-30s, sharp blazer, nervous eyes. It was Alicia Winters, the young hire Brian had tried to position as my replacement. Darren, she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. I'm sorry. I didn't know what they were doing to you. Inside the envelope were printed emails between Brian Everett and Apex Strategies, confirming everything in the memo. Alicia explained she'd been hired not to learn from me, but to shadow me, report on my client interactions, and help Travant prepare for my exit. When she realized they were digging into my personal life, she got spooked and started copying documents as insurance. Here's where I'll reflect. Alicia's confession hit me hard. She wasn't the villain Brian had painted her as, just a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. I saw myself in her 20 years ago, eager to prove myself in a cutthroat industry. But her courage to come forward to risk her career reminded me that even in corporate warfare, there's room for integrity. I thanked her to promise to keep her name out of it and left with the envelope. Driving home, I felt a mix of rage and resolve. Travant hadn't just betrayed me, they'd built a machine to destroy anyone who stood in their way. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone they'd tried to crush. The next morning, I met Lawrence at his office. He reviewed Alicia's documents and whistled. This is a goldmine, Darren. We can sue for wrongful termination, invasion of privacy, and maybe even racketeering if we tie Apex to Veritas. But then he leaned forward, his voice low. There's something else. I did some digging. Apex Strategies has a history of this, targeting key employees at firms Veritas wants to acquire. They've done it in Chicago, Dallas, and now here. If we go public, we could blow this wide open, but it'll make you a target. Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. Let's do it. Here's a real-life story to ground this. Back in 2016, I helped a small Kansas City manufacturer, Baxter Industries, navigate a hostile takeover attempt. Their CEO, Linda Baxter, was like family to her employees. When a bigger firm tried to force her out, I spent weeks strategizing with her, finding legal loopholes to protect her company. We won, and Linda kept her business. That fight taught me something: when you stand up to bullies, you don't just save yourself, you inspire others. I thought of Linda as I prepared to take on Travant and Apex. This wasn't just my battle. It was for every employee who'd been blindsided by corporate greed. Lawrence and I spent the next week building a case. We reached out to a journalist at the Kansas City Star, Sarah Mitchell, who'd covered corporate scandals before. Sarah was hungry for a big story, and when we showed her the memo and Alicia's emails, her eyes lit up. This could be national, she said, but we need more. Can you get someone inside Travant to go on record? That's when Julia, my former assistant, stepped up. She'd been quietly collecting evidence since my firing memos meeting. Notes, even recordings of Brian bragging about cleaning house. Julia was risking her job, but she said, Darren, you were the only one who treated me like a person, not a resource. I'm in. The story broke 2 weeks later, a front-page expose titled Travant Corp's Dirty Playbook, Spying Firings, and a Failed Acquisition. Sarah detailed everything: my termination, Apex's surveillance, and Veritas's role. The fallout was immediate. Travant's stock plummeted another 15%, and clients I hadn't even contacted started pulling their contracts. By the end of the week, 14 companies had left, totaling $7.8 million in lost revenue. Everett issued a public apology, claiming he was unaware of Apex's tactics, but no one bought it. Social media exploded with Travant takedown trending on Twitter. I stayed quiet, letting the truth speak for itself. But then came the twist. One morning, as I was leaving for Grantley, a black SUV pulled up outside my house. 2 men in suits stepped out, introducing themselves as FBI agents. Mr. McCabe, we need to talk about Apex Strategies. My heart sank. Apparently, Sarah's article had caught the attention of federal investigators, looking into Veritas Capital for racketeering and corporate espionage. They wanted my cooperation and Alicia's documents to build a case. In exchange, they offered protection because Apex had a reputation for silencing whistleblowers. I agreed, but the weight of it hit me. I wasn't just taking down Travant. I was stepping into a much bigger fight, one that could put my family at risk. Let me share another story. In 2019, I worked with a client, Westfield Properties, during a real estate crisis. Their CEO, Mark Westfield, was facing pressure to sell his family's legacy to a corporate giant. I spent late nights with him crunching numbers, finding investors to keep his company independent. When we succeeded, Mark gave me a bottle of 20-year-old scotch and said, "Darren, you fight like it's your own family." That's how I felt now, fighting for my clients, for Alicia, for Julia, like they were my own. But the FBI's involvement meant the stakes were higher than ever. Over the next month, I worked closely with the agents, handing over everything I had. Alicia agreed to testify, and Julia provided her recordings. Meanwhile, at Grantley, business was booming. My team closed another $3 million in deals, and Michael Grantley promoted me to Chief Client Officer, a role that gave me even more autonomy. But the pressure was mounting. One night, Rebecca found an unmarked envelope in our mailbox with a single photo, me walking out of Lawrence's office. No note, just a clear message someone was watching. Rebecca begged me to back off, but I couldn't. Not now. I hired a security firm to protect my family and kept going. Then came the second twist. At a client dinner with Travis Hriss, he dropped a bombshell. "Darren, you know why Veritas was so desperate to buy Travant? They're not just after your clients, they're after your data." Travis explained that Travant had been quietly collecting sensitive client data. Financial records, trade secrets, even personal details through Apex's consulting work. Veritas planned to use that data to dominate the market, not just in Kansas City, but nationwide. My firing was part of a bigger plan to secure that data without me asking questions. Suddenly, it all made sense. The IT guy at my computer, the strategic advisors meeting my clients, they weren't just phasing me out, they were stealing my clients' trust. I brought this to the FBI, and they escalated their investigation. But the real shock came a week later. Everett Stanton showed up at my office, unannounced, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Darren," he said, "I'm begging you, call off the dogs. I'll give you anything. Stock, a board seat, name it." I stared at him, the man who'd once promised me a future at Travant, now reduced to pleading. "Everett," I said, "you didn't just fire me. You betrayed every client who trusted us. This isn't about me anymore." He left defeated, but not before slipping me a USB drive. "If you're going to burn it all down," he said, "you'll need this." The USB contained Travant's entire client database, years of sensitive data, exactly what Veritas wanted. I handed it to the FBI, and within days, they raided Apex Strategies' offices in Chicago. The news hit like a tsunami. Veritas's CEO resigned, and Travant filed for bankruptcy. My phone was flooded with messages from former colleagues, clients, even competitors. One stood out, a text from Brian Ellsworth. "You win, Darren, but you'll regret this." I deleted it. His threats were empty now. Let me reflect here. This fight wasn't about revenge, though it felt good to see justice served. It was about accountability. Travant and Veritas thought they could play God with people's lives, their data, their trust. But they forgot one thing: the market doesn't lie. When you break trust, you break everything. My clients didn't follow me because I was charming. They followed because I delivered every time. That's the lesson I want you to take away. Your integrity is your power. Guard it fiercely. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the National Financial Services Summit in New York, invited as a keynote speaker. The topic, trust in the digital age. I shared my story not to gloat but to warn. I talked about Travant, Apex, and Veritas, about how greed can blind even the smartest leaders. I showed data from Grantley, 92% client retention, 45% revenue growth, all because we prioritized people over profit. The audience, CEOs, analysts, regulators, gave me a standing ovation. Backstage, a young woman approached me. "Mr. McCabe, I'm starting my own firm. How do I avoid becoming Travant?" I smiled. "Hire people you trust and trust the people you hire. Everything else follows." As I sat in that Kansas City diner with my family, savoring the warmth of their laughter and the greasy comfort of a double cheeseburger, I thought I'd finally closed the book on Travant. The FBI was dismantling Apex Strategies, Veritas Capital was reeling, and Grantley and Company was thriving under my leadership. I'd faced betrayal, fought for justice, and come out stronger, But life, as I've learned, doesn't let you walk away that cleanly. Just when I thought I'd won, a new storm was brewing, one that would test my resolve, threaten my family, and uncover a conspiracy so wild it would make the Travant scandal look like a warm-up. Buckle up, because this next chapter is where things get truly unhinged. The trouble started a week after the National Financial Services Summit. I was back in Kansas City juggling client meetings and onboarding a new account manager when my assistant handed me a courier envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed in stark black ink. "You think you stopped Veritas? They're just the tip. Drop it or your family pays." No signature, no specifics, just a cold threat that sent a chill down my spine. I'd dealt with corporate games before, but this was different. This was personal, and it wasn't just about me anymore. Rebecca, Emily, Jack, they were in the crosshairs. I called my security firm, immediately doubling the protection around our house. But the question gnawed at me: who was behind this, and what did they mean by the tip? I showed the note to Lawrence Finch, my attorney, who didn't mince words. "Darren, you've kicked a hornet's nest. Apex and Veritas weren't working alone. This smells like a bigger player, someone with enough reach to make threats like this stick." He suggested I meet with the FBI agents again, but I hesitated. Handing over the note meant escalating things further, and I wasn't sure I was ready to drag my family deeper into this mess. That night, I sat Rebecca down and told her everything: the note, the threat, the possibility that Veritas was just a front. Her face went pale, but she didn't flinch. "Darren," she said, "you've always fought for what's right. Don't stop now. We'll handle this together." Her strength steadied me, but the fear lingered. The next day, I met with Special Agent Carla Ramirez, the lead on the Apex investigation. I handed her the note and explained my concerns. She frowned, scribbling in her notebook. "We've been tracking Veritas's financials, and there's a trail leading to an offshore entity, Calyx Group." Ever heard of them? I hadn't, but the name sent a shiver through me. Carla explained that Calyx was a shadowy holding company rumored to control stakes in multiple financial firms across the US, including Veritas. "If they're involved," she said, "this isn't just about Travant. It's about market dominance, data, clients, everything. And they don't play nice." She promised to dig deeper, but warned me to watch my back. These people don't make empty threats. Let me pause to reflect. Up until now, I thought I was fighting a corporate battle. Greedy executives, shady consultants, a failed acquisition. But Calyx Group, that was a whole new level of sinister. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion only to find a ticking bomb at the core. I'd spent my career building trust, closing deals with handshakes and honesty. Now I was caught in a world of offshore accounts, anonymous threats, and power players who saw people like me as collateral damage. But I wasn't backing down. Not after everything I'd been through. That evening, I got a call from Travis Hriss, my biggest client, and a friend who'd stuck with me through the Travant fallout. "Darren, we need to talk. In person. Now." His voice was tense, not like the laid-back Travis I knew. I met him at a quiet coffee shop in Overland Park, a Kansas City suburb where no one would recognize us. Travis slid a USB drive across the table. "One of my IT guys found this in our system after we left Travant. It's a backdoor malware hidden in the contract management software they gave us. It's been siphoning data for months." I stared at him, my mind racing. "What kind of data?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "Financials, client lists, even employee records. And it's not just us, every major Travant client got hit." This was the twist that changed everything. The malware wasn't just a Travant problem, it was a coordinated attack, likely tied to Calyx Group. They weren't just after market share, they were stealing the lifeblood of every company I'd worked with, including Lockhart Manufacturing, the Henderson Group, and Carlton Industries. Travis leaned in, his voice low. "Darren, I trusted you with my business. Now I'm trusting you to fix this. If this data gets out, we're all finished." I promised to take it to the FBI, but as I drove home, a new fear gripped me. If Calyx was behind this, they knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. That threat against my family wasn't a warning, it was a countdown. Here's a real-life story to make this hit home. Back in 2017, I worked with a Kansas City tech startup, Horizon Innovations, run by a young CEO named Rachel Nguyen. Her company was developing a new payment platform when a competitor tried to sabotage them by hacking their servers. I helped Rachel secure emergency funding to rebuild their system and hire a cybersecurity team. When we caught the culprit, a contractor tied to the competitor, Rachel didn't just sue. She went public, exposing their dirty tactics. Her courage saved her company and inspired me. Now facing Calyx, I channeled that same resolve. This wasn't just about protecting my clients, it was about exposing a predator before it could strike again. I handed the USB to Agent Ramirez the next morning. Her team analyzed it and confirmed the malware was military-grade, designed to evade detection. Worse, it had been active for over a year, funneling data to an encrypted server in the Cayman's Calyx's backyard. "This is bigger than we thought," Carla said. "We're talking potential RICO charges, racketeering, conspiracy, the works. But we need a smoking gun, something tying Calyx directly to Travant and Veritas." She asked if I could reach out to Alicia Winters again. Alicia had gone quiet since testifying, and I worried she was in over her head. Against my instincts, I agreed to track her down. Finding Alicia wasn't easy. She'd left Travant and moved to a small apartment in Independence, Missouri, just outside Kansas City. When I knocked on her door, she looked like a ghost, pale, jumpy bags under her eyes. "Darren, you shouldn't be here," she whispered, letting me in. Her apartment was sparse with packed boxes in the corner. "I'm leaving town. They know I talked." Before I could ask who they were, she handed me a burner phone. "This is how they contacted me after I copied those emails. It's all I have left." The phone had a single text dated a week ago. "Stay silent, or you're next." I convinced Alicia to come with me to the FBI. She was terrified, but she trusted me. As we drove to the federal building, I noticed a gray sedan tailing us. My security training kicked in. I took a sharp turn, then another, losing them in Kansas City's downtown traffic. But the message was clear: Calyx was closing in. Let me share some perspective. In moments like this, you realize how fragile trust is. Alicia risked everything to help me, just as my clients trusted me with their businesses. But trust comes with a cost, and I was starting to feel it. Every choice I made, going to the FBI, exposing Travant, chasing Calyx, put more people in danger. I wasn't just a salesman anymore. I was a lightning rod, drawing fire from forces I barely understood. But backing down wasn't an option. Not when my family, my clients, and people like Alicia were counting on me. The FBI put Alicia in protective custody, and her burner phone gave them a new lead, a shell company linked to Calyx that had wired payments to Apex Strategies. But the real bombshell came a week later when Julia, my former assistant, called me in a panic. "Darren, you need to see this." She'd been cleaning out her desk at Travant her last day, before joining Grantley, when she found a hidden flash drive taped under a drawer. It contained a video, grainy but unmistakable Brian Ellsworth in a private meeting with a man I didn't recognize, discussing neutralizing McCabe and securing the data pipeline. The other man mentioned Calyx by name, promising Brian a 7-figure payout if he delivered my client's data before the Veritas deal closed. Julia overnighted the drive to me, and I took it straight to Carla. This was the smoking gun. The FBI moved fast, issuing subpoenas for Brian and several Travant board members. But Brian was one step ahead. He'd vanished, last seen boarding a private jet to the Bahamas. Social media lit up with speculation, with hashtag #WhereIsBrian trending alongside hashtag Travant Takedown. Meanwhile at Grantley, my team was feeling the heat. Clients were spooked by the data breach news, and I spent hours on calls reassuring them we'd hired a top cybersecurity firm to protect their interests. Travis Hriss stood by me, even increasing his contract with Grantley. "You're the only one I trust to clean this up," he said. His faith kept me going, but the pressure was crushing. Then came the next twist, one that nearly broke me. Late one night, as I was leaving Grantley's office, my phone rang. It was Emily, my daughter, sobbing. "Dad, someone's outside the house. They threw something through the window." My heart stopped. I called Rebecca and told her to lock the doors and call the police. I sped home, breaking every traffic law in Kansas City, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, police cars lined our street, their lights flashing in the dark. Rebecca and the kids were safe but shaken. A brick lay in our living room, wrapped in a note. "Last warning. Stop or lose everything." The police promised to investigate, but I knew this was Calyx flexing their muscle. They weren't just threatening me, they were terrorizing my family. Here's a story to anchor this moment. In 2020, I worked with a Kansas City non-profit, Hope Haven, to secure funding after their office was vandalized by a rival organization. Their director, Maria Lopez, refused to back down, even when her car was torched. I admired her grit, and we raised enough to rebuild. Now, staring at that brick in my living room, I felt Maria's fire in me. Calyx thought they could scare me into silence, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I moved my family to a safe house paid for by Grantley and doubled down on the fight. The FBI used the video to issue an international warrant for Brian's arrest, and they traced the shell company to a Calyx executive, Victor Lang, a reclusive billionaire known for his ruthless tactics. Carla warned me that Lang was untouchable. Too many connections, too much money. But I had an idea. I reached out to Sarah Mitchell, the Kansas City Star journalist, and pitched a follow-up story, The Man Behind Calyx, how one billionaire tried to steal America's financial future. Sarah jumped at it, and we leaked just enough of the video to force Lang's hand. The article dropped like a nuclear bomb, with CNN and Bloomberg picking it up. Lang issued a public denial, but the damage was done. His investors started pulling out, and Calyx's stock tanked. But the fight wasn't over. One morning as I was briefing my team at Grantley pulled me aside. "Darren, there's someone here to see you." In the conference room stood Everett Stanton, looking like a man who'd aged a decade. "I'm done running," he said. "I'll testify against Lang and Calyx. I was in too deep, but I want to make this right." I didn't trust him, not after everything, but his offer was too big to ignore. Everett revealed that Calyx had blackmailed him into the Veritas deal, threatening to expose his own financial missteps. In return for immunity, he gave the FBI a ledger detailing Calyx's payments to Travant and Apex, sealing Lang's fate. Let me reflect here. Everett's betrayal had started this nightmare, but his decision to come clean showed me something: even the worst mistakes don't define you forever. I didn't forgive him, not yet, but I respected his choice to face the music. It reminded me why I kept fighting. This wasn't about revenge, it was about rebuilding trust, not just for me, but for an industry that had lost its way. The final twist came a month later at a federal courthouse in Kansas City. Victor Lang was indicted on 17 counts, including racketeering and wire fraud. Brian Ellsworth was arrested in Nassau, extradited, and charged as a co-conspirator. Everett's testimony was the nail in the coffin, exposing Calyx's entire operation. The trial was a media circus, with my name splashed across every headline. I testified too, recounting every detail from my firing to the brick through my window. When the judge sentenced Lang to 20 years, the courtroom erupted. Outside reporters swarmed me, but I had only one thing to say. This isn't my victory. It's for every client, every employee who trusted me to do what's right. Back at Grantley, we threw a quiet celebration, not for the trial, but for our clients. My portfolio now topped $25 million, and we'd launched a pro bono division to help small businesses recover from data breaches. Alicia joined our team, thriving as a junior account manager. Julia became my right hand, her courage earning her a promotion. And my family, they were my rock. One evening, as we watched Jack's band play at a local venue, Rebecca squeezed my hand. "You did it, Darren. You made it right." I nodded, but the truth was, I was just getting started. As I stood in that crowded Kansas City venue, watching Jack's band tear through their set, Rebecca's hand in mine, I felt a fleeting sense of peace. The trial was over, Victor Lang was behind bars, Brian Ellsworth was awaiting sentencing, and Grantley and Company was soaring. My family was safe, my clients were secure, and I'd carved out a legacy built on trust. But if there's one thing I've learned in this game, it's that victory is never final. Just when I thought I'd slain the dragon, a new shadow loomed, one darker, more personal, and far more dangerous than anything I'd faced before. What came next wasn't just a fight for my career or my clients, it was a battle for my soul, my past, and the future I'd fought so hard to build. Stick with me, because this is where the story takes a turn you won't see coming. It started with a phone call 2 weeks after the trial. I was in my Grantley office reviewing a new client proposal when my personal phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Darren McCabe," I answered, expecting another reporter or client. A low, gravelly voice replied, "You think you're untouchable now, don't you? Digging up Calyx was a mistake. You're not done paying." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My first instinct was to brush it off, another empty threat from a cornered player. But something about the voice lingered familiar, yet out of reach, like a ghost from a life I'd left behind. I called Agent Carla Ramirez at the FBI, who ran a trace on the number. It was a burner, untraceable, but she didn't sugarcoat it. Darren Lang's indictment rattled cages. Someone's still out there, and they're not happy. Stay vigilant. That night I couldn't sleep. Rebecca noticed her eyes searching mine as we lay in bed. "What's wrong, Darren? You've been on edge since the trial." I told her about the call, downplaying it to keep her calm, but the truth was I was rattled. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of everything: Travant's betrayal, Calyx's threats, the brick through our window. I'd fought so hard to protect my family, but what if I'd only delayed the inevitable? The next morning, I hired a private investigator, Tom Brennan, a grizzled ex-cop I'd met through Lawrence Finch. "Find out who's behind that call," I told him. I don't care what it costs. Tom nodded, his eyes narrowing. You've got enemies, Darren, but enemies always leave tracks. While Tom dug into the call life at Grantley kept me busy. We were expanding, opening a new office in St. Louis to handle our growing client base. My team was firing on all cylinders. Julia was running point on client relations. Alicia was closing her first major deal, and Travis Friss referred us to 3 new companies, pushing our portfolio past $28 million. But the success came with a shadow. At a team meeting, one of my analysts, Kevin, mentioned hearing rumors in the industry. People are saying Travant's collapse wasn't just Calyx, he said. There's talk of a silent partner, someone who funded the data scheme but stayed in the dark. I brushed it off publicly, but privately Kevin's words echoed that mysterious call. A silent partner, the idea gnawed at me. Here's where I'll pause to reflect. In my 20 years in this industry, I've learned that power hides in the shadows. Travant, Veritas, Calyx. They were all pieces on a chessboard, but who was moving them? I'd spent my career reading people, clients, competitors, even Brian's smug grin. But this was different. This felt like a predator watching, waiting for me to slip. I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I was fighting to uncover a truth that could rewrite everything I thought I knew. And the deeper I went, the more I realized how personal this was about to get. A week later, Tom Brennan called me to a diner in Kansas City's West Bottoms, a gritty industrial area where no one asked questions. He slid a folder across the table, his face grim. "You're not gonna like this, Darren." Inside were photos, phone records, and a name I hadn't heard in decades, Gregory Vaughn. My stomach dropped. Greg was my old college roommate from the University of Missouri, a brilliant finance major who'd gone rogue after graduation, dabbling in shady hedge funds before disappearing from my life. We'd been close best man at each other's weddings, but I hadn't spoken to him since 2001 when he asked for a loan I couldn't give. According to Tom, Greg was now a silent investor in Calyx Group, funneling money through offshore accounts to bankroll their data scheme. The burner call traced to a shell company tied to Greg's network. This was the twist that broke me. Greg wasn't just a ghost from my past, he was the architect of my present hell. The photos showed him meeting with Victor Lang in Zurich months before my firing. The phone records linked him to Apex Strategies, even to the IT contractor who'd tampered with my computer at Travant. But the real gut punch was a grainy surveillance shot, Greg sitting in a car outside my house the night the brick came through our window. My old friend, the guy I'd once trusted with my secrets, was orchestrating this nightmare. I thanked Tom and drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. Why? What had I done to make Greg hate me this much? Let me share a real-life story to ground this. Back in 2015, I helped a Kansas City restaurant owner, Tony Marcelli, save his family business from foreclosure. Tony had been betrayed by his cousin, who'd siphoned money from the books to fund a side hustle. I sat with Tony through sleepless nights, restructuring his finances and confronting his cousin. When we saved the restaurant, Tony hugged me and said, "Betrayal cuts deepest when it's family." Now facing Greg's treachery, I felt that same knife. He wasn't family, but he'd been close enough, and that made this personal in a way Travant or Calyx never could. I took Tom's folder to Carla Ramirez, who confirmed Greg's role. "Vaughn's a phantom," she said. "No arrests, no public profile, but he's got his fingers in every dirty deal from here to Singapore. If he's after you, it's not just business, it's a vendetta." She urged me to go into protective custody with my family, but I refused. Running wasn't my style. Instead, I asked Carla to set a trap. If Greg was watching me, we'd use that to draw him out. She agreed, but warned, "This is dangerous, Darren. He's not Lang, he doesn't play by rules." I nodded, knowing the risk. This wasn't about saving my career anymore. It was about confronting the man who'd turned my life into a battlefield. The plan was simple but risky. I'd leak a fake story through Sarah Mitchell at the Kansas City Star claiming Grantley had uncovered new evidence in the Calyx case, a master file detailing every player in the data scheme. The file didn't exist, but we made it convincing with encrypted emails and dummy documents planted on Grantley's servers. Carla's team monitored the bait, waiting for Greg to bite. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances, client meetings, public speeches, even a ribbon cutting for our St. Louis office. But every step felt like walking a tightrope. Rebecca noticed my tension, and one night she confronted me. "Darren, you're not yourself. What aren't you telling me?" I broke down and told her about Greg, the betrayal, the trap. She hugged me, her voice steady. "Finish this, but don't lose yourself doing it." Then came the next shock. At the St. Louis office opening, a man approached me in the crowd, a courier, young, nervous, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Greg. Darren, it read, "You were always the golden boy. Perfect job, perfect family. I gave you a chance to walk away in '01, but you chose yourself. Now you'll lose it all. The master file won't save you." My blood ran cold. The letter wasn't just a threat, it was a confession tying Greg to every move against me, from Travant to the brick. But it also revealed something else, his motive. That loan I refused in 2001, it wasn't for a business deal, it was to save Greg's marriage, his life. When I said no, he spiraled, blaming me for his fall. This wasn't about Calyx or data, it was about a 20-year grudge. Here's where I'll reflect. Betrayal is a wound that festers, and Greg's letter showed me how deep it can cut. I didn't know how much that loan meant to him. Back then I was young, broke, starting a family. But to Greg, my refusal was a rejection, a judgment. I'd spent my career building trust, but I'd failed him when it mattered most. That guilt hit hard, but it also clarified something. This fight wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about ending a cycle of pain for both of us. I gave the letter to Carla, who used it to tighten the trap. Her team traced Greg's movements to a penthouse in Chicago, where he was meeting with Calyx's remaining investors. The fake master file had worked. Greg's hackers were probing Grantley's servers, leaving digital footprints the FBI could follow. But just as we were closing in, another twist hit. Julia called me late one night, her voice trembling. "Darren, someone broke into my apartment. They took my laptop, my notes, everything about Travant." I rushed to her place where police were already dusting for prints. The thief had left a calling card, a business card for Apex Strategies, with a handwritten note. "Back off, McCabe." Greg wasn't just coming for me, he was targeting everyone I cared about. This was my breaking point. I called a meeting with my Grantley team, laying it all bare. "Greg, the threats, the stakes. I won't ask you to stay," I said. "This is bigger than any deal." To my surprise, they rallied. Alicia, her voice steady, said, "You fought for us, Darren." "We're not leaving." Travis Friss on speakerphone added, "Your family man, we've got your back." Their loyalty gave me the strength to keep going, but it also raised the stakes. I wasn't just protecting my family anymore, I was protecting a community, people who believed in me. The final showdown came a week later, in a way I never expected. Carla's team tracked Greg to a private airfield outside Kansas City, where he was preparing to flee to Dubai. The FBI planned a sting, but I insisted on being there, not to confront him, but to see it through. As we hid in an unmarked van, watching Greg board a sleek Gulfstream jet, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Look behind you." I froze, turning to see a black SUV idling across the tarmac. Before I could react, Carla's team moved in, surrounding the jet. Greg stepped off, hands raised, but his eyes locked on me through the van's tinted window. For a split second, I saw the friend I'd known, then the man he'd become, consumed by rage. But the real twist wasn't Greg's arrest. As the FBI searched his jet, they found a laptop with a live feed security footage of my house, my office. Even Jack's band practice. Greg hadn't just been watching me, he'd built a surveillance network tracking every move I made for months. The feed was streaming to an encrypted server, and Carla's techs traced it to a new player, Meridian Trust, a financial conglomerate that had quietly bought Travant's remaining assets during bankruptcy. Meridian wasn't just a bystander, they were Calyx's successor, picking up where Lang left off. Greg was their enforcer, but Meridian was the puppet master. Let me share a story to anchor this. In 2018, I worked with a Kansas City hospital, Mercy General, to secure funding after a cyber attack exposed patient data. The CEO, Dr. Ellen Carter, fought tooth and nail to protect her patients even when the board wanted to settle. I helped her hire a forensic team that traced the attack to a rival hospital's contractor. Ellen's resolve inspired me. She didn't just save her hospital. She rebuilt trust. Now facing Meridian, I felt that same fire. Greg was down, but the real enemy was still out there, and I wasn't done fighting. The FBI raided Meridian's headquarters in New York, seizing servers that confirmed their role in the data scheme. Meridian's CEO, Catherine Wells, a polished executive with a reputation for ruthlessness, denied everything. But the evidence was overwhelming: emails, wire transfers, even a contract hiring Greg to neutralize key threats. The scandal dominated headlines, with #Meridian exposed trending for weeks. Grantley's stock soared as clients flocked to us, trusting our transparency. My portfolio hit $32 million, and we launched a client protection fund offering free cybersecurity audits to every company we served. but the personal cost was steep. One evening, as I sat with Rebecca in our safe house, she handed me a letter from Emily. "Dad," it read, "I'm proud of you, but I'm scared. I just want us to be normal again." Her words hit like a freight train. I'd spent years chasing justice, protecting clients, but had I lost sight of what mattered most? I hugged Rebecca, promising to scale back to be present. The next day, I promoted Julia to VP of Client Relations, giving her the reins to run our day-to-day operations. Alicia took over key accounts, proving herself a natural leader. I stepped into a strategic role, focusing on vision and family. Then came the final twist, one that tied it all together. At a client dinner with Travis Hriss, he pulled out an old photo from his wallet. A group shot from a 1990s industry conference with Travis, me, and shockingly Greg Vaughn, all smiling, young and full of ambition. "I never told you," Travis said, "but Greg came to me after you refused that loan. He was desperate, said you'd abandoned him. I didn't buy it, but I saw the hate in his eyes. This was never about Calyx or Meridian. It was about you." That photo was a gut punch, a reminder of how one choice, one moment could ripple across decades. I didn't regret saying no to Greg, but I wished I'd seen his pain, reached out, done something to stop the spiral. As I sat with Travis Hriss in that Kansas City steakhouse, staring at that old photo of us with Greg Vaughn, the weight of 2 decades pressed down on me. My fight had toppled giants, Travant Calyx, Meridian Trust, and put men like Victor Lang and Brian Ellsworth behind bars. Grantley and Company was now a beacon of trust in an industry scarred by greed, and my family was safe, my legacy growing. But that photo, those smiling faces from a simpler time, reminded me that every victory has a cost. I thought I'd faced the worst, but the truth is the deepest cuts were still to come. What happened next wasn't just a battle against external enemies. It was a reckoning with my own past, a test of my family's strength, and a conspiracy so twisted it would force me to question everything I'd built. Hold on tight, because this chapter will leave you speechless. The next morning, I woke with a nagging sense of unease. Travis's words about Greg's hatred echoed in my head, and Emily's letter, her plea for a normal life, sat heavy on my heart. I'd promised Rebecca I'd step back, focus on family, but the industry wasn't done with me yet. At Grantley, I was preparing for a major client summit in Chicago, a chance to showcase our new cybersecurity initiatives and cement our reputation. Julia and Alicia were running point, and the team was buzzing with energy. But as I reviewed the guest list, one name stopped me cold: Elizabeth Vaughn. Greg's sister, a name I hadn't heard since college. She was listed as a consultant for a new firm, Paragon Advisors, with no clear ties to Calyx or Meridian. Coincidence? I didn't believe in those anymore. I called Tom Brennan, my private investigator, and asked him to dig into Elizabeth. "Be discreet," I said. "If she's connected to Greg, I need to know before Chicago." Tom grunted, already on the case. Meanwhile, I confided in Julia, who'd become more than an employee. She was family. "Darren," she said, "you've got a knack for stirring up trouble. But if Elizabeth's playing a game, we'll beat her at it." Her confidence steadied me, but the timing felt off. Why now, with Greg in custody and Meridian crumbling? Why would his sister surface? My gut told me this was no accident. It was the next move in a game I hadn't fully understood. Here's where I'll reflect. In my career, I've learned that trust is a double-edged sword. You build it with clients, colleagues, family, but it also makes you vulnerable. Greg's betrayal taught me that, and now Elizabeth's name felt like a warning, a reminder that the past never stays buried. I'd fought for my clients, for justice, but each step deeper into this mess pulled me further from the life I wanted with Rebecca and the kids. I wasn't just fighting for truth anymore. I was fighting to keep my soul intact. Tom's report came 2 days before the Chicago summit. Elizabeth Vaughn, 44, had a clean public record finance degree from Northwestern, a string of consulting gigs, and a low profile. But Tom's sources uncovered a bombshell. Elizabeth was a silent partner in Paragon Advisors, a firm funded by a web of offshore accounts linked to Meridian Trust's remnants. Worse, she'd been in contact with Catherine Wells, Meridian's disgraced CEO, weeks before Wells's arrest. The kicker? An encrypted email intercepted by Tom's hacker contact showed Elizabeth promising to finish what Greg started. The target: me, my clients, and Grantley's reputation. This wasn't just personal, it was a calculated strike to rebuild Meridian's empire on the ashes of my success. I took the report to Agent Carla Ramirez, who was already stretched thin, managing the Meridian fallout. "Elizabeth Vaughn's a ghost," Carla said, scanning the file. "No criminal record, no direct ties to Calyx or Greg's operation, but if she's moving against you, she's smarter than her brother. We can't touch her without hard evidence. Carla suggested I skip the Chicago summit, but that wasn't an option. Grantley's future and my client's trust depended on showing strength. I agreed to wear a wire, letting the FBI monitor my interactions with Elizabeth. If she's coming for you, Carla said, we'll catch her in the act. The Chicago summit was a glittering affair held at the Palmer House Hilton, a historic hotel buzzing with industry heavyweights. I delivered the keynote outlining Grantley's client protection fund and earning a standing ovation. Travis Riss in the front row gave me a nod of approval. But my eyes kept drifting to Elizabeth, a poised woman in a sharp blazer mingling with CEOs and analysts. She approached me during the cocktail hour, her smile disarmingly warm. "Darren McCabe," she said, extending a hand. "I've heard so much about you. My brother Greg was a fan back in the day." Her tone was light, but her eyes were steel. I played along, keeping my responses vague, while the wire recorded every word. Then came the first twist. Elizabeth pulled me aside, lowering her voice. "I know what you did to Greg," she said, "but I'm not here to fight. I want to partner with Grantley, merge Paragon's tech with your client base. It's a win-win." I was stunned. A partnership after everything? My instincts screamed trap, but I nodded, promising to consider it. Later I played the recording for Carla, who was skeptical. "She's baiting you," she said. "Paragon's tech is a front. They're developing AI to exploit the same data Calyx stole. If you sign on, you're handing them your clients on a platter." I agreed, but Elizabeth's offer planted a seed of doubt. What if she was genuine? What if I was wrong about her? Here's a real-life story to make this hit home. In 2016, I worked with a Kansas City brewery, Riverfront Ales, whose owner, Mike Callahan, was offered a lucrative buyout by a corporate giant. I helped Mike dig into the deal, uncovering a hidden clause that would have gutted his brand. We walked away, and Mike rebuilt independently. That experience taught me to trust my gut, and right now it was telling me Elizabeth was playing a long game. But her charm, her connection to Greg, it messed with my head, made me question my instincts. Back in Kansas City, I called a family meeting. Rebecca, Emily, and Jack deserved the truth. I told them about Elizabeth, the summit, the wire. Emily, now 19, was furious. "Dad, why can't you just stop? You've won. Let it go." Jack, 22, was quieter, but his eyes said the same. Rebecca took my hand. "Darren, we trust you, but Emily's right. This is tearing you apart. Promise us you'll end it soon." I promised, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Elizabeth's offer was a chess move, and I had to counter it without losing everything I loved. Then came the next shock. At Grantley, Alicia burst into my office, her face pale. "Darren, check your email now." An anonymous sender had leaked a dossier to our entire client list, accusing Grantley of laundering money through our client protection fund. The dossier was slick, with forged documents and fake bank records, all pointing to me as the mastermind. Within hours, 3 clients paused their contracts, and social media was ablaze with #Grantley scandal. I called Travis, who was livid but loyal. "This is Meridian's playbook, Darren. Someone's trying to bury you." I knew who Elizabeth. The dossier had Paragon's fingerprints, subtle but unmistakable. I rallied the team, working with our PR firm to debunk the dossier. Julia and Alicia spent nights combing through our financials, proving every transaction was clean. Sarah Mitchell at the Kansas City Star ran a counterstory exposing the dossier as a smear campaign. But the damage was done. Our stock dipped 10%, and I felt the weight of my team's trust faltering. That's when Elizabeth called, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Darren, I heard about the scandal. Let's meet. Paragon can help you weather this." It was a power play, and I was done playing nice. I agreed to meet her, but this time I'd set the terms. The meeting was at a private club in downtown Kansas City, all dark wood and cigar smoke. Elizabeth arrived alone, her confidence unshaken. "The dossier wasn't me," she lied, "but I can make it go away. Join Paragon and we'll clear your name." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Elizabeth, if I know you're working with Meridian's remnants, I know about the AI, the data. Drop it, or I'll bury you like I buried your brother." Her smile faltered just for a second, but it was enough. The wire caught it all. As I left, I texted Carla. "She's in. Move now." The FBI raided Paragon's offices the next day, seizing servers that confirmed Elizabeth's role. She wasn't just Greg's sister. She was Meridian's new queen, rebuilding their data empire with AI that could predict and manipulate client behavior. The raid uncovered a chilling detail. Elizabeth had planted the malware in Grantley's systems during the Chicago summit using a hacked USB drive handed to one of our analysts. It was a betrayal on par with Greg's, and it nearly destroyed us. But the FBI's evidence was ironclad, and Elizabeth was arrested charged with cybercrime and conspiracy. Here's where I'll pause to reflect. Elizabeth's betrayal cut deeper than Greg's, not because of our history, but because I'd let her get close. I doubted my instincts, let her charm cloud my judgment. It reminded me that trust is a choice, and even the strongest can falter. But it also showed me the power of resilience. My team, my family, my clients didn't abandon me, even when the lies piled up. That's what kept me standing. The fallout was seismic. Paragon collapsed, and Meridian's remaining assets were frozen. Grantley's reputation rebounded, with clients doubling down on their contracts. Travis Hriss threw a private dinner for our team, toasting to the man who never quits. But the real victory came at home. One night, Emily handed me a new letter. Dad, it read, "I'm not scared anymore. You showed me what it means to fight for what's right. I love you," I cried, hugging her tight. Rebecca and Jack joined in, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Then came the final twist, one that brought it all full circle. A month after Elizabeth's arrest, I received a package from an unknown sender. Inside was a journal written in Greg Vaughn's handwriting, dated from his time in custody. It was a confession, a raw, unfiltered account of his descent. His pain after our fallout, his deals with Calyx, his orders to Elizabeth to finish me, but the last page stopped me cold. "Darren, I hated you, but I envied you. You built what I never could trust, love, a life. If you read this, know I'm sorry." Greg had died in prison the week before, a heart attack alone. I sat with that journal for hours, torn between anger and grief. He'd been my friend, my enemy, my mirror, and now he was gone. As I closed Greg's journal, the weight of his final words, "I'm sorry," settled over me like a Kansas City winter fog. I sat in my office at Grantley & Company, the city skyline glowing through the window, and felt the silence of a war finally ended. Travant was a memory, Calyx and Meridian were dismantled, and Elizabeth Vaughn faced a trial that would keep her behind bars for years. My clients were thriving, my team was stronger than ever, and my family was whole. But the scars of this journey, betrayals, threats, and the haunting truth of Greg's pain would stay with me forever. I thought I'd reached the end, but life, as always, had one final lesson to teach me. This is how it all came together, and why I'm sharing it with you, not for glory, but for the truth that binds us all. The weeks after Elizabeth's arrest were a blur of rebuilding. Grantley's Client Summit had become the talk of the industry, with our cybersecurity fund hailed as a game-changer. Travis Hriss, ever the loyal friend, hosted a barbecue at his sprawling ranch outside Kansas City, inviting our entire team. As we laughed over ribs and cold beers, I watched Julia mentor Alicia, saw my analyst swap stories with clients, and felt a pride deeper than any deal I'd closed. This was what I'd fought for, not just money or power, but a community built on trust. Travis pulled me aside, his eyes serious. "Darren, you didn't just save our businesses. You reminded us what loyalty looks like. Don't ever forget that." His words hit home, a reminder that the real victory was in the people we protect. But the personal reckoning was still unfolding. Emily's letter had shaken me, and I knew I owed my family more than promises. One evening, I gathered Rebecca, Emily, and Jack in our living room, back in our own home, now the safe house of fading memory. I set out a box of mementos, the painted coffee mug Emily made me, at AITA photo from Jack's first guitar recital, a love note Rebecca slipped into my briefcase years ago. "I've spent too long chasing justice," I said, my voice catching. "I missed too much, your games, your milestones, you. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Emily hugged me, tears in her eyes. "We just want you, Dad." Jack nodded, his usual stoicism cracking. Rebecca smiled, her strength my anchor. That night we ordered pizza, watched an old John Hughes movie, and laughed until midnight. It was ordinary, and it was everything. Here's where the final twist came, not a shock, but a revelation. A week later, I received an invitation to speak at the Kansas City Business Journal's annual gala, honoring leaders who'd reshaped the region. The keynote wasn't about my wins or Travant's fall, it was about trust, the thread that holds businesses, families, and lives together. As I prepared my speech, I found an old email from Everett Stanton sent months before his testimony against Calyx. "Darren," it read, "I envied your integrity. It cost me everything, but it saved you. Keep it." I hadn't replied then, but now I understood. Everett, Greg, even Elizabeth, they'd all made choices that led to their downfall. Mine, flawed as they were, had led me here. The gala was held at the Kaufman Center, Kansas City's crown jewel, all glass and light. I stood at the podium facing a sea of faces, clients, colleagues, competitors, and my family in the front row. I didn't talk about numbers or scandals. Instead, I told a story. 20 years ago, I said no to a friend who needed me. That choice haunted me, led to pain I couldn't foresee. But it also taught me this: trust is your currency, and every choice you make spends it or earns it. I've fought for my clients, my team, my family, but the real fight is within, to choose integrity, even when it hurts. I shared how Grantley grew, not on greed but on accountability. 53% faster service, 30% lower costs, 92% client retention, but I ended with my truth. The greatest deal I ever closed was coming home to my family whole. The room erupted, but my eyes were on Rebecca, Emily, and Jack, their pride brighter than any spotlight. Backstage, a young entrepreneur approached me, her voice shaky. "Mr. McCabe, I'm starting a business and I'm scared. How do I know who to trust?" I smiled, thinking of Greg, of Everett, of Travis. "Trust yourself first," I said. "Build from there, and the right people will follow." That night, driving home under a starlit Missouri sky, I passed the old Travant building, now a co-working space with a new sign. I didn't slow down, didn't linger. The past was done, its lessons carved into me. At home, Rebecca had framed Emily's letter, hanging it beside that old quote about success. I turned it face up again, not for revenge, but for truth. My success wasn't in toppling empires, but in building something better. I kissed Rebecca, checked on the kids, and slept without an alarm for the first time in years.